name is Tony Susie, and I am a type snob. So there's a specific reason why I mean, again, when you're a designer for any period of time, if you go to design school, they teach you all the principles of design. And where I went to design school, there was a huge emphasis on typography. The first typography class we took, you had to learn to identify 50 typefaces. And if you didn't identify them, then you failed on your tests. So we had sheets of like the whole typeface up and why they look different. And so like this is kind of smashed into my brain whether I liked it or not. And I eventually liked it. But at the time, it was a little rough. The things that are the worst type sins ever put upon man, in no particular order, are a couple of things. One, don't stretch or bastardize the type in a terrible way, because somebody spent hours just laboring over every line, curve, jot, and tittle of that typeface. And when you do that, it's like spitting in the face of the designer who did it. It's not a good thing. Disrespectful. Secondly, don't use Comic Sans or Papyrus. Ever. Even when it feels bright. Sometimes things feel right and you just shouldn't do them. That's one of them. I mean, for instance, Coca-Cola, right? Coke actually has multiple typefaces for the logo. You got the swishy whoopty one that goes, Coca-Cola. You have the Coke one that's just a really nice, solid serif typeface. Bold, big, put it on Coke cans. It looks beautiful. So, that's a good instance. And when you do type well, when you create something that is well balanced and looks appropriate for what your project is, there's a euphoria to it of like, yeah, I'm satisfied. I did something good today. I did it well. I executed it well, and it's going to go out into the world, and hopefully people will like it. So that's from the making side of it. When you see it out in the wild, it's like, from my perspective, it's an appreciation, of like, well done, whoever did that. So it's always good to compare things, of the same category. So here we have two different hot sauces. The interesting thing with them is that, they're serving two different purposes. I mean, here you have Tabasco, which is a well-established brand, been around for forever, and it works, right? This isn't as super high, fancy or quality. There's a lot of information on it, maybe too much for my taste, but it works, Then we have Trop Flavor Co., which this is maybe this is a new upstart hot sauce brand, and it's simpler. They need to stand out off the shelf. They need to make an impact, and it works. So two things, two different styles, two different kinds of personalities to it when you see it immediately. One's a little bit more, rough and tough and trying to hit above its weight of what it is. And then the other one is, multi-million-dollar company, and, they don't have to. So that's two good instances there. It's always good to compare things that are similar. Now, here we have this, acrylic, Master's Touch Fine Art Studio acrylic paint. And this is appropriate because this is a high-end paint. Like, that works, You see that kind of the color, the type treatment, how it's laid out, it's minimal, and it's also trying to appeal to people who are very visually literate, who literally make the images all day. So this is like a good appeal for artists, visually oriented people. And then we have like Classico, like a traditional, Italian, food-based brand. Now, this is on the shelf with other things like the tomato ketchup and everything, but this has a little bit more personality, a little bit more, what a regular viewer would consider like that kind of Italian base, that nostalgic, old school, old world flavor. If this was designed to modern and trendy, it's going to fit a different market. Your grandmother is going to buy this. They're not going to buy the super trendy one that's in Whole Foods. So, it's, again, what the audience is. This is very appropriate for the audience. There's always a balance of it, and you think of Google, the whole logo's type. So, what do you think of when you think of Google? Think of the multicolored type that goes with it. So it does evoke an emotion, and if it's done well and consistently enough, then that person automatically has a reaction or a concept of what it's trying to convey. Somebody who digs holes every day is good at digging holes and knows how to dig holes really well. So somebody who kerns type every day and lays out type every day has a little bit more of an in-depth knowledge than somebody who doesn't. So that's where that comes from. That's a little bit of backstory, and yes, that has been what made me who I am today in terms of the type snobbery. So I would prefer, if it was up to me, I have like 5 typefaces that I would use all the time and that I kind of use all the time. But Helvetica's in there. I personally like National, which is I don't know. It's a sans serif. It's to me it's a more has a little bit more personality. But I'd prefer that somebody use Helvetica instead of something bad. Well, typefaces. These typefaces in no particular order, and the kinds of people who use them. Comic Sans. I mean, you're just a psychopath if you use that. Papyrus. You're like a crunchy kind of person who thinks that that gives some texture to it, but really it's just obnoxious. Rockwell isn't a bad typeface, but it's used in bad ways. It's a little blocky and funky, and that's just like, oh, I want something that's not a sans serif, but has a little bit of chunkiness. That person is a little bit more on solid ground. They're not a psychopath with their type, but they're just a little like, I want to put some personality into it when it's not necessary. American Typewriter, that's a different one. Now, that's like, I want to look folksy and like from the 50s, but, you know, again, kind of lazy. So, like, that's like, let's give a little bit of history to this in an easy way. Boom, American Typewriter. So that person is like nostalgic, not necessarily in a good way. Somebody who uses Helvetica. I love Helvetica. I would say use that all the time. I'm more of a Futura guy and Gotham, so that it isn't just straight up Helvetica. If you're going to use Helvetica Neue, which is like the updated version of the typeface. Beautiful. Just kind of like have a concept behind why you're using type and what typeface you're using. Don't be lazy. It's not that hard. Like put a little bit of thought into it. Don't be a jerk to people who love type and appreciate the people who make it. What if like the bear wore pants, but you know, like those kind of fun pants, like you know, they can be red and they can have patterns and like